Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live stream for History by Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Kipp Davis, and we're going to be discussing the War Scroll, which is one of the many Dead Sea Scrolls that are out there. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Davis.
Thanks, Jacob. It's good to be here.
Yep. All right, so let's start us off with this question. When you
Hey,
read,
before we get into it, maybe I can even.
okay,
This is kind of a good opportunity, I think, since we're
okay,
going to be talking about the War Scroll today. Maybe just even to update people on what's happening, because there are some pretty exciting things happening um, with this manuscript. So, one of my mentors, Martin G. Abegg, wrote his doctoral dissertation on the War Scroll. Has been working on a revised critical edition of all the what we call the M materials. The Hebrew name for the War Scroll is Milchama or M. And this includes the Cave 1 copy as well as the Cave 4 um, warlike copies and the Cave 6 copy. So it's all going to be in there, and it's something he's been working on for 7 or 8 years now at least. But I think he's starting to round the corner and approach the finish line. He lives actually quite close to me. I'm only about 10 minutes away. And so he has opened up the conversation as he nears completion of this brand new edition, which will be the first ever edition of all the War Scroll materials together, and I think the first edition of the War Scroll um, in many years. But as
mm,
he's rounding completion on this, he's invited me and a couple of other scholars, such as Joseph Angel, um, and maybe Joseph Angel for sure. I know the two of us certainly he's invited to kind of be conversation partners with him, eh, specifically with regards as to how to handle some of this very complicated K4 material. So I'm pretty excited about that. And that's what's happening. So I think I would imagine that within the next year, maybe 2 years, there will be a whole lot more to talk about with this manuscript. Sorry to cut you off there, but I
oh
thought
no, that's
that
wonderful.
was
That
important,
sounds
interesting
exciting.
information.
I actually, it makes me wonder if if he would be open to doing an interview with other people, because I'd certainly like to talk to him about it if he is, if that's okay with him.
Yeah, Marty hates doing interviews.
That
So,
sucks.
and I, yeah, and he's told me, you know, uh, point blank, basically that
Okay.
he's stopped doing them. Um, I think he said he did one like a year ago for a guy who does like a local
Mhm.
newsletter from his church, but yeah, I mean, I I have been I haven't worked all the way up to it yet, but I've been hoping that I could convince him to do something here or there.
Yeah.
Um but if he ever comes around, I will certainly see about putting you in touch with him, but
I would
I'm
appreciate that, yeah.
yeah, I'm not hopeful though, Jacob.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that some people hate doing interviews, and I
He's
get it.
just he's a neat guy who just likes
Mhm.
to sit in his house, uh, next to the river and work on his scroll fragments and talk to his friends about manuscripts. and that's what he loves to do. So
Well, before I get to my question, it looks like we already have a super chat from Dafa
oh wow.
Raffaelli. Thank you for your super chat. His question is, do you think the Jews like to change their text before the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Oh yeah, I would say that what the scrolls generally show us is that this is just a snapshot of a roughly 200 to 300 year period of textual development in which the text is still being negotiated, it's still being updated, it's still being uh, altered and corrected and manipulated in an effort to make it contemporary and to keep it relevant to current circumstances. But I say it's a snapshot because it certainly looks like this is part of a process that has been ongoing since the very beginning. One of the buzzwords in Dead Sea Scrolls scholarship is this idea of rewritten Bible, or so-called parabiblical literature, which quite dynamically retells stories from the Old Testament, but also rewrites the legal material as well. um, and I mean, this is something we see already taking place within the so-called biblical period. I mean, the book of Deuteronomy is essentially just a renegotiation of the covenant code and a bunch of the stuff in the book of Numbers. The holiness code is also another renegotiation of stuff that we find in the book of Exodus. The books of First and Second Chronicles is a rewriting of First and Second Kings. So this is stuff that is ongoing, and we can trace all the way back. So I would say, yeah, it's just this idea of change in the text is native to the text.
When you read and attempt to understand what the War Scroll is saying, what kind of feeling do you get when you try to imagine what the text is telling you about? Is the author of the text trying to suggest that there will be an end time apocalypse, like, say, the book of Revelation, or something quite different from that?
So I'm going to I've picked up Martin Abeg's new term, and I quite like this to describe the War Scroll is a lexica of war traditions. And I think one of the things, I mean, it's a complicated text to read, and I would say even more difficult to understand in large part um, because it's it's a i- obviously a compilation. I don't think it was written by a guy. I think these are this is a compilation of a variety of similar texts, or texts within a fairly narrow genre. I'm not even sure what to call it beyond war traditions, that have been cobbled together and compilated. For example, the fragments I have up on my screen here are from 4QMA 4Q491, which is one of our copies of the War Scroll from Cave 4. But based on what we see in these fragments, and based on our attempts to reconstruct this very fragmentary manuscript, we see quite clearly that this is, I would say, an earlier stage of development in which um, portions of what we see, blocks of text that we see in the Cave 1 copy, this large, beautiful, complete copy of the War Scroll, or nearly complete copy of the War Scroll. There's blocks and chunks of text that we see in there also in this manuscript, but in different order, with quite a bit of variation and literary difference. So all that to say at the outset that the idea of authorship with regards to the War Scroll is at the start pretty complicated. And the idea of what this text is, I mean, you can read it, and I think that's probably what the compiler, or if we're going to talk about an author, the compiler author of the Cave 1 version, I expect this is probably what he was trying to do, was to write out something that provided a linear framework to these already existing traditions. So, I mean, what is it? It is a when Marty talks about it being a lexica of war traditions, it's grounded in this idea that there was this apocalyptic expectation about the last days, and the uh the the collectors and the writers of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Qumran scenes or the Yachad scenes, appear pretty obviously to have had in view this notion of a violent spiritual conflict at the end of the age. And I think what you see embedded within the War Scroll are snapshots of this commitment to this idea. Um, and yeah, perhaps as I suggested, the Cave One copy is an attempt on the part of a guy, or this community, to to set some of this stuff into a literary framework. Of course, it's so pregnant and loaded with symbolic language and metaphor and um, analogy that I would be cautious in um how do I put this? I am cautious about how much stock I put into their belief in this text being a calculated depiction of what they certainly anticipated in the end. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Good.
So when do you think that this war tradition started out? And
Oh,
when do you
yeah.
think, in terms of estimated dating, that it probably got put together and compiled as a war scroll?
So yeah. Um so the Cave One copy's pretty late. Um it's first century. I believe it's first half of first century CE. So, right around the time of Jesus is when we're talking about. Some of these copies, like this one, is earlier. It's been a long time since I looked, but I think I dated this particular copy to much closer to the beginning of the first century BCE. Um, the this stuff is already at the point of development. I think it's probably safe to say that, and I unfortunately, I've not done a lot of work with all the manuscripts, so some of my thinking on this is undoubtedly pretty shallow. Um, but I think I I'm comfortable saying that the collections of these traditions probably started, fairly early on in the emergence of this particular community. So I would suggest, you know, during the early Hasmonean period is maybe when you start, and I think it makes sense based on some of the imagery that we see scattered throughout the text itself. One of the things that becomes quite clear as you read through is a fixation on priestly purity and separating this pure priestly group, the Sons of Light, from um from virtually everybody else, but that within that is embedded an implicit critique of the existing Jerusalem priestly establishment, which is something that I would also say is central to the overall conflict that the people living in the Yachad in Qumran um, are experiencing, in real time.
When the war scroll speaks of the sons of light combating the sons of darkness, who are they talking about? Who are these two forces?
Yeah, so I mean, right in the let's see, I've actually got right in the first column here. um, it identifies really what's involved in that term. It says, for the instructor, the rule of war, the first attack by the sons of light will be launched against the lot of the sons of darkness, against the army of Belial, against the band of Edom and of Moab, and the sons of Ammon and something Philistia, and against the bands of the Kittim and Ashur, who are being helped by, and this is important here, right? They are being helped by the violators of the covenant. So, and this group then is distinguished from the sons of Levi, the sons of Judah, and the sons of Benjamin, the exiled of the desert. So right away we've got the bad guys here who are being identified in all this coded terminology, the Kittim, Edom, Moab, Ashur. So these are, I mean, the Kittim more generally is understood to be the Romans. Um, the other terms um are these come from predominantly from the biblical, the Hebrew prophets in a lot of their um uh critique of the outside world. um but this kind of language is being reemployed by the people living in Qumran because there's no more, I mean, there's really no more Edom and there's no more Moab this time, right? So these are being directed, and I don't believe, I haven't looked closely enough at it. I don't know how to isolate or identify these specific groups on the basis of this coded language. But the thing that I would say is very interesting in this, so you've got the Romans, and then you've got these other, I would assume these are groupings of goyim, of Gentiles. This probably includes something like the Samaritans. Um, I would say maybe even this can be extended to other Jewish groups like the Pharisees. Um, but here's where it gets fuzzy, because at another point, at the very end, there they're quite intent and specific to identify within the sons of darkness the violators of the covenant. So these are certainly, this is certainly a Jewish group, and whether this is just everybody within, you know, Judaism that disagrees with the Qumran Yachad's take on things, or is this just this Jerusalem priesthood with whom they're from whom they're disenfranchised? I don't know. Um, but I guess I will say, I hope that that covers, I guess, my understanding of everything that's included in this term, the sons of darkness. I should also mention as well, because the belief here is that this is as much a quote unquote spiritual battle as it is an actual battle against flesh and blood. This would then include the mention is made of Belial, who is, the term that the Yahad Essenes used to identify, I guess, what Christians called the devil or Satan. So there is an evil power, um, who is also controlling a spiritual or a non-fleshly army, a cosmic army, that's going to be aligned with these actual enemies. And we see the same thing on the other side. The good guys, the sons of light. These are the Judahites and the Benjamites and the Levites. And of course, this isn't an actual picture of actual tribal designations. This is, again, coded language for identifying the characteristics of who they think the good guys are. But they will likewise be fighting alongside of actual angels, in an actual battle that is going to be directed by God.
What do you make of the argument that some make that the War Scroll appears to be making, and at least some parts of it, references to 2nd century BCE Roman weaponry.
Hmm. Yeah. I don't know a lot about that, but
Yeah.
I would yeah, I mean I think that fits. I think that could work. It certainly fits within the time frame that I imagine this manuscript or these collections of traditions to have emerged. Um and that too, if that's accurate, then it could be another clear indicator of precisely uh more precisely pinpointing where and when temporally these traditions uh where they came from. So you're talking about things like the standards and the banners. um um what other kinds of things in there would describe or align with second century Roman weaponry?
I remember the argument from Russell Gamirkan, who
Yeah,
believes
okay.
that I think he made some kind of argument about the Roman formation, about the way they formed up and the way
Oh,
they formed
okay.
units and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, again, this is something I unfortunately
Mhm.
don't know a lot about, but I'm intrigued.
Mm.
Um, something I'll certainly maybe not look into, but we'll consult the expert that I know about it.
Do you think that the War Scroll authors believed, or maybe one of them believed, that this final battle will occur after the righteous teacher resurrects when the 40-year period is finished?
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Um and I'm not necessarily convinced that this is uh a clearly expressed idea uh throughout the scrolls. At least maybe I is this the teacher of righteousness, or is this, another teacher of righteousness? Is a discussion um that takes place. So I don't yeah, yeah. And it's not something that, again, because it doesn't fit precisely, I guess, the same framework of the Yachad's own self conception. It's not really something that the texts themselves address, certainly not directly. So it's hard to say how they saw all the pieces fitting together. I mean, they had some uh real tangible expectations for, their community. But then I also think the War Scroll probably envisions something much broader and more global. That I'm not certain or convinced that just this little group at Qumran was the Sons of Light. They
Hmm.
certainly viewed themselves as part of it, right?
All right.
Um, so I would say yeah, I would say um we can't really know, and one of the reasons we can't know is because their own localized expectation was not clearly defined within what I would see here as I guess a broader expectation, if that makes sense.
So, in other words, you would urge caution against like readers of the scrolls to say, okay, let's bundle all these guys up into one
Yeah,
set.
absolutely. It's very. I mean, I get the temptation, and it's something that scholars have been doing. I mean, since the scrolls have been published, is attempting to quite finely trace um th- the historical narrative that they believe they can thread through the various texts, and then also their own historical eschatological expectation. But because w- we still have uh huge gaps in our understanding of how all these texts even fit together, yeah, it's caution reigns with regards to really finely um uh assigning this stuff like into their own self-conception.
What do you think of the War Scroll mentioning the sword of God? Was there an expectation that a divine sword would be provided to the messianic movement by God, or
Mm.
was it not a literal sword?
Uh, now I would expect, that is something that I would say is metaphorical. Whatever this was, not, yeah, not an actual sword, and that's because this contradicts a fair bit the Qumran conception of God, who was this great cosmic spiritual being, right? Um, so whatever this weapon was, and I don't know, but it wasn't something I think quite so tangible. I would tend to view it in line with the way in which the writers of these traditions are using um, uh, these very very heavy metaphors and symbols throughout the texts.
Would it be fair to say that when the scroll was assembled by either a redactor, editor, or multiple editors are putting it together in
Hmm.
a collaborative effort, were they reinterpreting the text that they were seeing when they were putting them together to in reaction towards the Roman annexation of Israel?
Yeah. Or maybe even in
Mm,
reaction to I guess heightened tensions that they're seeing as we're marching closer and closer to 67. Yeah, I think there's some value in that idea that the signs of the times and the politics of the day were likely prompting a rereading of these traditions, or something certainly serious enough to prompt putting together a manuscript like this, which is quite. I mean, the scroll itself is a large scroll, and it is expertly written. It was um, produced by a professionally trained scribe on an exquisite collection of parchments. So, I mean, this was it provides the earmarks of what Emmanuel Tove identified as deluxe editions, although he restricted his definition to exclusively quote unquote scriptural or Bible manuscripts. Um, I think that might be artificial. Uh, and I guess I would say that you could read just from a scribal perspective, or a view of the um codicology and the construction and manufacture of manuscripts. You could read this as a response to something of urgency in order to produce something of of greater permanence and public use.
We've got a super chat question from Crossover Maniac. Thank you for your super chat. Was Belial worshipped as a god by a rival tribe? I've heard some of the names of demons or deities in other religions.
As far as I know, not. The term itself stems from it. As I understand it, the term itself actually stems from. Let me just pull it up here. Um, First Samuel. Uh, what chapter is it? Is it chapter 2? Uh, okay. There's Hannah. Eli's sons. The story of so this is this is um First Samuel chapter 2. This is the story of the sons of Eli, who was the Levitical priest who oversaw the ancient shrine at Shiloh. Um and of course, the the story goes that his sons were these rotten guys who corrupted the sanctuary, and as a result, Yahweh's anger, um you know as a result, meant that he basically cut Eli's line off, and promoted Samuel as basically the caretaker and the high priest at Shiloh. But the description of Eli's sons appears in chapter 2 verse 12, and it literally says Uvne Eli Bene Belial. And it's a play on words between the Uvne Ali Beni and Belial. So, and this basically reads the sons of Eli were sons of Belial, or as lots of Bible translations will render, as wickedness, as worthless, as good for nothing. So they were shit, right? Um, so it's a I would, as far as I know, I don't know of there being any actual archaeological or textual evidence to indicate that this was ever an actual um, Canaanite deity, or even a deity that emerged at some point in the Second Temple period. I think this was always an indicator, and as far as I know, it is an exclusively Jewish or Hebrew um, term applied to um, this at as it's personified. It's applied to this wicked cosmic being. So it's a late development, and again, I'm not convinced that this actually aligned with a rival god or an idol of some sort.
What do you think of the part of the scroll that says that to take your captives and plunder them? Do you think this is kind of reversing what happened in, say, the Babylonian captivity, for example? It's like, okay, so instead of the Jews being plundered and taken into
Yeah.
captivity, they're the ones doing it to their enemies.
Yeah, no, I think that's there. It's very much in line with it's certainly the psychology. It's the same psychology at work on the part of the writers of the manuscript, and it is um it stems from this these revenge fantasies that develop out of a feeling of collective persecution. I know Alex Jason, who teaches at New York University, has actually done some very nice work on um, the language of violence and violent imagery within the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I think within Second Temple Judaism more generally, and explores these ideas in just this fashion as revenge fantasies, basically, that are born out of persecution. He contributed a very nice essay to the volume of collected essays that I put together. Just give me a sec here. Uh, yeah. In this book here, oh, can you see that?
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah. So in this book here, he explores some of the same stuff in an essay titled, where did I put it? Uh, there it is. Um, it's this one here. Violent Imaginaries and Practical Violence in the War Scroll. Um, and he might even, it's been a long time since I've read it, but he might even um, explore more specifically that section about plunder and captives. But I think you're probably on point there.
I want to circle back to this this new edition of the War Scroll.
Yeah.
Um, does it is he going to be basically providing information that would help people understand not only the overall theology but also the date of the text when he thinks it
Well,
was
yeah.
written?
Yeah, so that will certainly factor into it. And bear in mind, this is going to be a technical volume, so
Okay.
it's it's going to be um, a difficult one for people to just pick up and read. So this will be appearing in the new Dead Sea Scrolls Edition series from
Okay.
Brill. There's already there's two volumes, I believe, that have now been published. The volume by Larry A. Schiffman on the Temple Scroll was published last year, as or even maybe it was even in towards the end of 2021. Um, and then just recently, just before SBL in November, um, Joseph Angel's excellent work on the songs of, I believe it's the Song of the Sage, and what's the other one? It's the two manuscripts together, 4Q510 and 4Q511, has now just been very recently published. So it's going to be appearing in this series. It's going to be far too expensive for anybody to actually buy. You're gonna have to go to your favorite research library in order to find it. But yeah, this is absolutely something that that Marty uh, w- has and will explore and provide clear information on, in terms of when we date the War Scroll, the theology that's contained within the War Scroll, and you know, he'll. I mean, he's essentially uh, needing to cover as many ideas pertaining to the text as possible in order to provide a comprehensive framework for it, and for, the traditions from Cave 4 and Cave 6 as they work their way into the War Scroll.
Well, before we close out, do you have any advice for the audience if that any viewers that may want to actually dig into resources and study the War Scroll? What would you point them to?
Yeah. Okay. So one of my favorite, most accessible books on the War Scroll is one by Jean Duhaime. And maybe actually the easiest thing is to just pull it up from my bibliography here so I can get the title right. And maybe you could even look this up, Jacob, and find an Amazon link for it. If I can find my own essay in here, that'd be great, wouldn't it? Okay, there we go. Oh, rats. Here we go. I forgot how I put this book together. Okay. So he wrote it. I mean, it's a bit dated now, but in 2004, he wrote a book called The War Texts, 1QM and Related Manuscripts. It's in the companion to Qumran Scrolls, Volume 6, by T&T Clark. It was published in 2004. So I would say start there. It's written at a like introductory college level, so it's something everybody should be able to access fairly easily. And he does a nice job of putting together a clear introduction to the War Scroll, to the copies of the War Scroll, to ideas by scholars about the War Scroll, and to the discussion, at least as it was taking place in 2004. And I don't believe it's ventured much farther until just recently, and with the work that Dr. Abeg is doing. So I would recommend that one. And if you want, maybe I could even just grab a link for it and throw it in the chat.
Sure.
So let's see. There it is. So I found one directly from Bloomsbury, which is who publishes these now. Oh, it looks like it's $62 there. Maybe this is something you can find on Amazon, but I'll just throw this into the chat here. There, you guys see that? So that's a good book. And then beyond that, there's lots of good introductions to the Dead Sea Scrolls. James Vanderkam and Peter Flint. The meaning of the Dead Sea Scrolls is quite good. George Bruck, Philip Davies, and what's the other guy? They wrote an introduction to the Dead Sea Scrolls that's more readily available in Europe, less so in North America. James Vanderkam on his own, and his introduction to the Dead Sea Scrolls was also very good. So you can find more information about the War Scroll in particular. You could also check. I've written a couple of articles about the War Scroll myself, and I believe that you can find you could certainly find at least one of these, if not two, on my own academia.edu page. So the one in particular is called Dead Sea Scrolls in Color, and it is an exploration of a handful of fragments from this manuscript 4Q491, in which I attempt to make an argument for the construction and the shape of this whole manuscript and the scribal activity that was involved in there.
We've got another super chat question. The
Sure.
Muslim apologist, thank you for your super chat. Is there anything in the Dead Sea Scrolls which are in congruence with Christian
Oh,
theology
yeah.
today?
Many things. And I mean, one of the reasons the Dead Sea Scrolls were so exciting, I think, and continue to be quite exciting for Christians, is that um, they align quite closely with a lot of the messianic expectation in particular that we see. Not all of it, but certainly aspects of it that we see in the New Testament. And in terms of ritual, the Dead Sea Scrolls community was a ritual community that practiced obsessive uh, cleanliness and ritual bathing, which most scholars believe is something that was reflected later through the practice of Christian baptism. It's been suggested that Christianity is basically what happened to the Dead Sea Scrolls community after Rome came through and destroyed their home in 70 on their way from Jerusalem to Masada. I don't buy that. Um, but what the scrolls do show is that Christian theology, generally, the ideas that emerge in Paul and then later, in the Gospels with regards to uh, the practice of religion, the relationship of people to the law, although on very different sides of this question, and in terms of ritual and expectation about the last days, and who the Messiah was and what he would do. A lot of this stuff shows that Christianity was thoroughly formed at the beginning, certainly, of Jewish sectarianism. It was a Jewish sect, quite similar probably to the Jews who were living and worshiping and practicing their faith at that's maybe a bad word for it, not their faith, their yeah, performing their religious observance at Qumran. So um yeah, I hope that's enough.
Thanks for joining me today, Dr. Kip Davis.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been good, Jacob.
Yeah. And I'd like to thank the super chat questions. Really appreciate it. And I'll see everybody later. Thanks again.
Excellent. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Hello viewers, thanks for watching this video from the History Valley YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And if any of you wish to further support this channel, please consider checking out this channel's Patreon page and becoming a patron, and or donate through PayPal or through Super Chat during a live stream. Thank you.